Okay. Yep, it looks like everything's coming through. How's it going, man?
Hello, and welcome to Scripts on Saturdays with Script Doctor, our host.
And TJ Mack of Mac Media.
That was not recorded. I regret saying that way, but it was fun. Thank you
Oh,
very
yeah,
much.
it was not prepped, but it worked. Heck, I can clip it, so there we go.
It's always nice to be here. Yeah. How was your? How I haven't talked to you in a few weeks. How was this last week? How's things going in Canada? Canada.
Uh, well, on my end of things, pretty good. Rest of the nation-wise, kind of messed up, but that when is that not the case anywhere throughout the world, right?
Yeah, but what city? What's the beautiful city that you live in? I mean, most everybody knows, right?
Well, I live in this region that's outside of Toronto, but I usually spend
Hmm.
most of my days downtown Toronto, which is actually pretty nice. I mean, it's beautiful, it's
Beautiful,
clean, snowy.
beautiful city. I think it's the best looking Canadian city,
One of
in
the,
my
I mean,
opinion.
we
I
got a
love it.
lot of great looking cities. I mean, for its density, it's pretty impressive how nice it looks
Yep, I love it.
for
I
like a
love it.
nearly 3 million population.
What's your latest in Hollywoodland? Scripts and stuff. Shopping around. Anything? Any good news? Any updates on anything?
Um, got a couple things in circling around. Where one of the projects I'm working on. We've got some pretty interesting distribution deals that have been signed and locked in, and we're just looking for some extra cash to basically pull the trigger on production. So, yeah, we've been spending
Well,
some
that's easy.
time.
That's easy. Just call Paul. Call Paul Chato. He'll take care of me. He's got money. It's coming out his ears.
Oh boy, yeah, um, yeah.
No, that's good
We're
though.
looking
That's
for
good news.
something
So
that's.
just funding then, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah. Which is most like it's that's 90% of the job is just finding money.
Yeah, I was being
Orson
sarcastic,
Welles has a
but
quote saying he spent more time finding money than making movies, and that was kind of his own. Uh, that was something that bothered him a lot. It's something that bothers a lot of filmmakers because really, so many have tons and tons of ideas and great stories to share, and some you're gonna love and some you're gonna hate and some you're gonna go, what the heck was that? But the fact of the matter is that well, the infrastructure is there. The decision makers are well, they don't have an appreciation for art.
right, right.
They're marketers. They're looking to codify art as product and nothing else, and it also goes back into the fact that the oversimplification of well, we just need to entertain them to shut their brains off for the next 2 hours, which seems horrifying to say because like if you met some of the world's histories and the world's greatest painters, it's like, do you want the people looking at your work to basically turn off their minds to just stare blankly at everything that you put onto that canvas, or do you want them to elicit an emotion or some sort of response out of what you put into that? And it's always going to be the latter.
I think art at its foundation is a spiritual thing, and so if it doesn't move you, if it doesn't evoke emotion, then
It doesn't stimulate thought. Like that's
right, right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's sad. That's sad. Then it's wasted for sure on
Oh yeah,
people
it
that
becomes
miss out on that. And
disposable and
and it changes. Like I've noticed as I've gotten older, there's different mediums of art that I've learned to appreciate more than when I was younger. I
oh
mean,
yeah.
uh, that's not a good example. The first thing that came to my head is kind of dumb, but I'll say it anyway, which was like history, like facts, like things like that. It wasn't until I was like in my mid 20s
Hmm.
that I even think about like documentaries and learning about what went on in the past and caring about it. And then once I did that, then I started to learn more about actual, art. There's still things I don't care about, that some people would say is a form of, I mean, would you consider wine tasting a form of art? Like people
Well,
work
I
really
mean,
hard to create different types of wines, and I think there's some value, some merit to that, don't you think?
I would say so because you're looking at creating a vintage
Yeah.
and the, fermentation techniques and okay, how can you get the most out of the grapes and the types of grapes that you're farming and converting over into alcohol and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
where does
And
it
I think
go?
that's
And you
yeah,
know
and I
what?
think that's fair. And oh, go ahead.
Well, I'll just say to your point. I think one of the reasons why so many adult males, especially when they get into their early 20s, become a fascination of history is because by that point they've recognized enough patterns that they actually have a question as to like, well, why do we have these patterns in this way? And
Yeah.
the crazy part is that you could actually get kids really invested in that if you were to show them those patterns early on because almost all the kids I knew growing up, myself included, if there was something that if there's a question posed to us that triggered an interest, we would jump all into it. And the biggest one is, of course, dinosaurs. Like, kids love dinosaurs. The
Oh
whole,
yeah,
wait,
I
these
remember
giant creatures existed? It's like, yeah. And you just want to learn everything about them. It's like, that's your
these were
pathway to
real.
education and doing your own research and just kind of getting lost into something. And if you can find a way to take that framework and apply it to all these other subjects in school, you probably would not have any issues with kids, scoring poorly on tests, or having trouble retaining the knowledge that they're
Yeah,
being taught. Yeah.
I remember I was probably kindergarten or first grade. I remember it. I remember because I remember the classroom, and everybody had their name up on the wall. Our teacher had like this train that went across the like up by the ceiling, and it was in order of birthdays. So every train car would come down in order throughout the school year, and then you would get that, and you get like a little birthday thing or something for your birthday, right? But I remember being in that classroom and learning how to draw dinosaurs like the Stegosaurus and stuff. I still remember that. I was like, 6 or 7. But yeah, I think your mind kind of opens up. I think you become less egocentric as you move out of high school. It's not just my world, the world opens up and you're like, okay, there's a lot of bigger things out here. And then I was lucky enough. I had a mom that when I was really young really encouraged us to read. And so during the summers we could go to the library and pick books we wanted. And then after I grew up on the country, so we had a lot of chores and stuff to do. And then afterwards, if you got your stuff done, you could do whatever you wanted. And growing up in the country, we had like 3.5 channels, NBC, ABC, CBS, and then PBS sometimes. So I'd be maybe get some Reading Rainbow, some Price is Right, but you can only watch so much of that. And then the soap operas came on, and so I hated that. So then I would read, and I love that I did that because then that opened up. That was my first early art form that I fell in love with was fiction, and then that grew as I got older, and television and film is just. It's my favorite, I think, right now, and I'm sad. I feel like I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but I really do. I was talking to my girlfriend about it last night, I think it was, yeah. And I just really feel like I'm nervous that, well, for sure, Hollywood as we know it is never going to be the same. I feel like it's in decline, but I don't think it's ever going to die completely. But I'm like, is the future of cinema? Before AI can make everything really easy. We don't know for sure what that's going to look like. But is the future of, because let me back up. We know that a lot of the younger generations, they don't care as much about film and TV like we do, right? Like it's all social media, video games. It's very different. They just, a movie has to be really big and good for it to pop up on their radar and go, okay, I think I'll go see this. It's just not it's just not the same. And that's fine. But then I'm like, so is the future of cinema going to be independent film? And I kind of hope it does because it's like indie gaming. Like some of the best stuff is not coming from the biggest studios anymore. It's just not because like you were talking about earlier, it's lost in the red tape of mid and upper management, right? You're managing art, and it's like, no, to do this, it's art. Good art comes from passion. It comes from caring. It comes from that drive of like, I've got to put this down. I've got to create this thing because if I don't, I'm going to die, right? I've got to get it out of me. And so I'm like, I kind of feel like that's probably what's going to happen, and we'll see. And in a way, I think that's good. I think it's like the behemoth has gotten so big that it needs to die and kind of we need to have a phoenix rise up from the ashes and have independent, studios or whatever. We need to make it smaller. I'd rather have 1,000 small studios than 5 huge ones, right? And
Yeah.
then we can get some really good stuff that's sincere. And we know that. That's the thing about art is if it's sincere, we know it when we hear it, when we watch it, it connects with us. This week I just read Project Hail Mary because Robert Meyer Burnett was talking about it on somebody's show this week. I can't remember. It might have been George the Giant Slayer. I can't remember for sure, but I read it. I'm like, because he was like, I couldn't put it down. I read the whole thing at my bar at my house. I wouldn't even go move over to the couch. And I'm like, okay, Robert, if it's that good, challenge accepted. So I grabbed it, put it on my Kobo, and I didn't do it in one sitting, but I did read it over 3 days, and it was phenomenal. And I've got to say this right now. We're leading back to the script. I haven't forgotten why we're here tonight, script. I think part of the reason I didn't love this script as much as maybe other people would have is because I just came off of reading that book. And it's written by, I can't remember his name, same author that wrote The Martian. And it's so good. Like, brought tears to my eyes at 3 different occasions throughout that book. I'm like, this is it? What? This is that? What? Like, I'm not going to reveal any spoilers at all. Holy crap. If you have it and you don't hate reading, even if you're like, maybe I'll read a book, read this book. It is fantastic, especially if you like science fiction. Have you read it? I don't know if you have.
Hail Mary, I think it's Andy Weir, right? So yeah, I think I've...
Yes. Project Hail Mary, and it's about the synopsis. The short synopsis is there's this thing that's starting to eat our sun. And Earth has about 30 years left. So all of Earth comes together to try and figure out what to do to save humanity. That's all I'm going to say. It's so good. I like The Martian. I listened to it on book on. I did an audiobook first, and then I saw the movie like a year or two after when it came out. And I'm glad I did it in that order. I always say that: read the books before you see the movies. But and as much as I liked that book, this was like, I don't know, it was 3 times better. I love it. I freaking love it. So recommend it highly to anyone listening. It's totally worth it.
But yeah, get into your sci-fi novels. Read well. I think reading more will definitely help you out better on your writing. And I don't want to like throw shade on this week's writer, Josh Corbin.
Oh no!
But I don't. I think he might need to up his game on that part, because I share some of the similar stuff to you. And with that being said, let's actually jump into the proper show itself. Always like the preamble stuff, because that kind of gets us fast and loose and into the mode of things. So that being said, welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs, discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is TJ Mack of Mack Media. So, we have got we've got this type of interesting story that... It hits certain targets that would normally be associated with like identity politics of sorts, but it tries to be very disciplined. I found in that manner.
That's fair. I agree.
We'll open up in this way. This week's script is titled Mildred. It is written by Josh Corbin. It came in 78th place with 9 votes, and. Mac,
and wait, this is last year's. This is last year's Blacklist, right? We're not on
that is correct.
Or is this? We're not. When does this year's list come out? Sorry.
Usually late November, early December.
Okay, gotcha.
So this is chronicling like stuff that was circulating around last year. I think as we discuss this more, people will probably see, or maybe understand why it placed towards the bottom of the list. But with that being said, I believe you wanted to do the log line this week, so please share with us the log line for Mildred.
All right, here we go. Years after being banished from her family, an aging matriarch returns to the family business to save her estranged children from a deadly criminal syndicate.
Yes, the synopsis goes as such. Mildred King, a butcher, exiled from her family for nearly 20 years, seeks to reclaim her children from corrupt forces. With her legacy and loved ones at stake, she battles betrayal and violence. As she confronts Simon Stanley, her daughter Poppy's fate hangs in the balance. With her daughter's Poppy's fate hanging in the balance, will Mildred triumph or lose everything? So, when I first read the log line, and I'm reading like aging matriarch returns to the family business, I'm thinking of like Maggie Smith, like 89-year-old woman coming back home.
Wait, you're talking the actress from Hook, the grandma from Hook, Wendy?
Sure, yeah.
You can go I love her. I did not imagine that, but that's hilarious that you went that old. That
when I think aging our main character Mildred is described as mid-50s. It's hard for me to think of that as like an aging matriarch because, again, over the last generation and a half, women have been aging way better than they have in the previous generation. I mean, take a look at someone like Marissa Tomei, who's 60, who still looks like she's, in her early 40s.
I'm not going to speak to Marissa, but I do know that plastic surgery has definitely, in general, helped what you're saying along. So, yes,
for some they have, but I mean, I've been around lots of women who are starting to hit that age, and they have not vanished long enough for plastic surgery to have been done secretly. I put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, but I agree. I agree. I think that there's some beautiful women. I wouldn't say 50s is old, but I'm also starting to get older, so I'm sure there's some Gen Zer out there that's like, no, that's old. Those are old people. But yeah,
True.
so I didn't go that old. I kind of figured like if it's going to be an action thing, which I could tell from the title, right? I'm like, she can't be sold. She can't do stuff. But I jokingly remember last night when we were jumping back and forth and confirming today, I said mafia and meatballs, right? And
Yeah.
you said yes.
Essentially,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I won't say the second one I said. We'll keep it PG. But yeah. Yes, I think that it was interesting. I think the log line is it's. I'm like, okay, where are we going? You know, my
Hmm.
first thing was, okay, are we doing John Wick with the woman? Is this going to be, you know, a lady boss thing? And yes, that's what we're doing. So
Kind of. It's like
yeah,
a
kind of,
little
yeah,
John
kind of.
Wick. There's definitely a lot of Tulsa King influence here. I
Def,
found.
def, definitely. I mean, but the name kind of it's even the same last, you know, the king name. So
Yeah.
um,
Oh no, I mean some of the names are very uninspired and derivative. It's like just doing royalty allegory is always kind of like weak. Or going with Smith is also kind of boring as well because it just doesn't give that extra connotation as to what this family is. It's like, oh, they're the King family, and what do they do? Well, they run a meat packing and meat farm, and it's like, okay, so clearly Josh has been watching a lot of Taylor Sheridan because you've got processing meat, so that's Yellowstone in the cattle, and then you've got organized crime, well, that's Tulsa King, and then you've got some John Wick aspects, but it's more like first John Wick, not legacy John Wick, where you have bulletproof suits and whatnot.
right.
And then it also comes with a. It reminds me of oh gosh, there was this. I think it's Smoking Aces is what it was or something. There's this crappy movie from like the early 2000s, which had a whole bunch of like it's supposed to be framed as a mystery, but it goes all the way back. Like it jumps back into like the 1930s, where an FBI agent goes undercover as a criminal heavy, and then eventually becomes like the head of a criminal empire. And there's plastic surgery and stuff, and there's all these twists and turns. This script is kind of trying to do that because the way the script opens up is we have Mildred. She's wearing like a Minnie Mouse sweatshirt, and she's got this like clear apron on. She's smoking a cigarette, drinking a beer. She's got a mallet in her hand, and she's like cooking eggs or something. And she's pontificating. It looks like she's talking to the audience, but she's actually talking to a man who is stripped down to his shorts, duct taped to a chair. One of his arms is like purple and severely injured, and she's trying to get information out of him. And she's torturing him with, like, she's got this rubber mallet or this wooden mallet. I can't remember which one, but it's really just referred to as a mallet. And it's kind of her favorite melee weapon of choice. And we get her, about to beat this guy up as he's, helpless, but
I do a chair, yeah,
not trying to. He can't scream because his mouth is gagged, but he's not whimpering or he's not terrified. He's actually just fuming with anger and rage, and he's not strong enough to break out of the duct tape binds to his chair.
Yeah, and I appreciated that. At least they didn't make him a total like crybaby. He's taking it like a typical bad guy on Reacher, the TV series Reacher.
Right.
It's like,
yeah.
okay,
Like,
I respect those bad guys.
And then
But the fact she's cooking an egg during this, that was the thing that I was just kind of like looking at sideways. I'm like, really? Like, come on.
it's trying to make this as nonchalant. Like this is her normal Tuesday for her.
No, it's not that. It's physics. Like the eggs are gonna burn, dude. Like she's gonna be like, hold on a minute, and she's gonna go flip it over. Like, how's she cooking this egg?
I think she's doing hard boiled eggs. Like that's I mean
Okay.
It's so I mean the whole idea is like, oh, here we have this kind of like homemaker mom. Like she's not portly or anything. She's kind of wiry. And she has a lot of tattoos on her body.
Oh yeah. The Tridents was very clear. Like this is going to be a thing.
Yeah. She used to be a biker babe, of sorts. But so yeah, she's got this calm demeanor to her, which I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And she's in a situation of power, and we don't know how she got there, but we jump back 2 days, and we're seeing that Mildred has learned how to hunt with a bow and arrow. She's in her mid-50s, and she's
Oh, quick,
mentoring this 20-year-old girl named Natalie, and
hold
they're
on,
yeah,
quick pause. I think it's important we hit this real quick. Is that the voiceover she was doing was focused on family? She's talking
yes,
about family because this is a key
families you
element. This is
make and the
actually
families you wind yourself into, and
yeah, a blood family or a family that you create on your own that's not blood. Like what you're loyal to, kind of a thing. So that's important. But yeah, anyway, keep going, script.
yeah, and that's what it comes down to because Mildred has for some time, we don't know how many years as of yet, but she has found this new family that she's made. She's found this 20-year-old named Natalie, and she has I think it's a younger brother named Jackson who has Down syndrome. And they're the two employees of her little meat shop called like Mildred's Meats. And one of the things that they do every morning or every other morning is they go out hunting with bows and arrows. And we find that Mildred and Natalie have landed a buck. Natalie shot and got pretty much a critical hit, but not enough to like seal the deal, so to speak. So the buck is on the ground, struggling for life. And Natalie's disappointed that, she didn't get it in one. And then Mildred, of course, finishes the job off with her bow. And we there's a little lesson here, which is that, you did everything as you're supposed to do. You just kind of have to fix your posture and adjust your stance a bit more. And then as you carry out through, you will have that kill shot. And it takes practice. But, you did good. And she's also trying to be encouraging and
yeah, she's being nice about it. She's a good coach, good mom.
Yeah, she's definitely a surrogate mother here, and the two drag the buck to the back of a Bronco, and
I do like the accuracy of compound bows because that's what you'd be using here. I'm not a huge hunter, but I did grow up in Idaho with I did all my hunter's ed stuff, and I'm like, yeah, this is okay, except for the part where they just go out every morning and grab a buck or a doe and bring it back. Like that's not how hunting works, but okay, we'll go with it because it's a movie.
There's somewhere up in Michigan, kind of like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, that's not how it works. And anyway, I'm not going to go down because there's some stuff I don't know about, but for the majority, you have to have a license and you don't get to just go whenever you want. And you sure as heck don't get to just carve it up and sell it to other people. You can use it for yourself, but that's stupid. I'm sorry I'm even going down that road. But anyway, but it was just one more thing that kind of bugged me, right? I'm like, can we be a little bit more realistic? Like they own a meat shop, like, and I get the scene. You want to set and show her that she's kind of deadly, right? She can use a bow and she's teaching it to her daughter. I understand the value of this scene. It is progressing our story a little bit, but I just think there would have been a better way to do this. But anyway, so yeah, then we get they drive a 79 Ford Bronco, which I appreciate. I'm like, I was wondering if it was white, because anytime I hear Ford Bronco, O.J. Simpson has ruined Ford Broncos for me. But
which is weird because you get great gas mileage. We know that from the chase. I mean, that's 100% true. That was a long chase, and it's like he hasn't stopped to get gas one moment. So
yeah, but he was going like 10 or 15 miles an hour the whole time. So yeah, your mileage is a lot better than a 60. But yeah, so then they move back to the shop, and that's where we meet. It was Jackson, the brother, who's 18 with Down syndrome, and he's working at the shop. Hard worker. I felt like his dialogue wasn't quite believable. I know two people with Downs, and this didn't feel right to me, but whatever. So so then we start to get a little bit more of a what's going on with family dynamics, right? Like what's going on with her and the kids and their lifestyle, basically.
Pretty much. And we find out that Mildred, she's been up here for almost 2 decades. She's very happy and content with this, but she also has this thing where she when she gets home, and even if she's drunk, she'll call a number, and the number's like to Poppy, and but she won't be able to leave a message. Like it always goes to voicemail, but she can't just leave a message. And then we kind of jump to Poppy, and we find out, okay, she's 27. She's kind of nestled in with her daughter, who's like a year old. And we're learning on the news, and we're also learning from this other aspect where we have Sebastian and what's the other kid's name? Liam. Sebastian and Liam are actually going to pick up the head of the family, which is Sebastian's dad. Bartholomew. Bartholomew is this script has way too many characters.
You laughed when I told you this, but I did this. I actually drew out a family tree because I was so confused. And yes, it is too complex. I think
it is very complex. So Sebastian is the father of Liam. Both of them have gone to a prison to pick up the grandfather, the king of the family, Sebastian. He's in his 70s. Bartholomew's in his 50s. Liam's in his 20s. You got 3 generations of kings, each kind of distinct. Sebastian is set up as a guy who's on an oxygen tank because he's got something, he's got some things. They don't specify what his ailment is, but he's
old. He's old.
Well, I mean, he's still younger than his dad, but yeah, he's dying. Yeah. And Sebastian is pretty much described as like Sly Stallone from Tulsa King.
That's the image I got. Yep, that's fair.
And now that he's out, he's basically, they're saying, look, well, you got a deal. We have to go talk to this other gang called the Butchers. We got a partnership with them. And
what's their gang?
And
did we say that?
Yeah, like their gang or
no, the King's gang. What's their gang? Because you were talking about the other gang. What's their gang? Do you remember?
Their gang is just the Kings, I think. I can't remember if there was anything else.
Oh, right. I'm thinking of the Tridents. So then we have the Tridents.
So we have the Kings, we got the Butchers, and then we have the Tridents. Now the Tridents,
there's 3.
That's another thing. Like again, this does break kind of like the rule that I like to wield, which is keep your story simple and your characters complex. And unfortunately here, the story is very complex. And the characters are
opposite.
quite simple, but there's way too many of them.
Yes, it's the opposite of what you just said.
Getting close to like 40 almost. Like it does narrow down as the script goes on, but it's still a lot to keep track of. And the relationships are a little tricky because at some point I'm like, okay, is Liam a cousin to Poppy or is he the other brother? Because at some point, Mildred talks about 3, leaving the 3 of them behind, and I'm like, well, who's the third? Because it's not her ex-husband. Like it just gets nuts. But we'll clear it up as best we can as we go. I will say,
I'm sorry, we haven't got to him quite yet. But the name Jimmy Mike, I just think Jimmy Mike is a stupid name. It just bugs me. I don't know how you feel about it, but names are important for characters. When I write stuff, I'm like, I put a lot of thought, and sometimes the name will change 5 times. And I'm like, this one to me just felt like it's just a dumb placeholder. Like Jimmy Mike, here's Jimmy Mike and Jimmy Bob. I'll rename them later when I get to my final draft. That kind of bugged me. So that's just something that's on its way. It's coming. We'll tell you more about Jimmy Mike soon.
It is coming. But what we have here is we have these 3 generations of King are returning to their home base, which is this big encampment, kind of like Yellowstone. Mm-hmm, and representatives from the Butchers are there. And it looks like the leader of the Butcher is this guy named Simon. And there's this other guy named Vic who's like the right-hand man. And, they're just having a nice little get-together, and this is Poppy's first visit back home since having her daughter, and it's made quite aware to everyone here that hasn't been here in a while, and so she's just trying to, like, be there, supportive for the family, not really learn anything about the business, because she doesn't want any part of it. And
she's been on the outside.
Yeah, and her younger brother, Devlin, is a junkie of sorts.
He's 23. He's a boxer, and he's just like, he's a druggie.
Yeah, he's a 5-5-1 with his record as a boxer.
And I think I know the penitentiary was in Pennsylvania. Are they still in Pennsylvania for the reunion?
I think so.
Where they're at, where the camp is. Okay, so that's so geographically, I think that's important in stories to know. Like, so they're up there in Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, our opening scene and all of that happened in Michigan. So
yes,
they're a ways apart.
Yes, they are a ways apart, and so this deal goes down in the sense that the Butchers are trying to usurp a little bit more power in with the King's organization, and Sebastian understands that times have changed because he's been in jail for like 30, 40 years, something like that.
I thought it was 17 years. Was it longer than that?
No. Mildred has been exiled for 17 years.
Oh, that's what it was.
But he is serving like a 40-year sentence, and I think they gave him like some time off because he turned state's evidence or something. It is a jumble when it comes to organizing the timeline that's going on here. But
okay, you're right. He was sentenced, but he only served 17. He got out. After
okay.
17 years. That's what it was. Yeah.
Okay, so that starts to make a little bit more sense. So he wants to see he wants to see the books. How is everything done? What's the operation?
Because the family was kind of like, they weren't sure if he'd even die in prison and get out. And so now that he's out, that's kind of caused this like, oh, okay, we got action now. We've got this intent. We've got this conflict, which is what we want for a good story, right? We need some conflict. So dad's out early, and we've got this big, meat packing company. And what are we gonna do? We got meatballs and mafia. What happens next?
And essentially, what happens next is that the moment Sebastian says he wants to look at the books and see how the transactions are going and what this new deal will be, the butchers pretty much betray the family and just open fire. And it's a big combat thing. And it also starts weird because the way the quote unquote shock happens is that someone with a shotgun shoots Sebastian in the face. And then a page or two later, Sebastian is like on his feet beating the crap out of other guys. And I'm thinking he just got shot in the face with a shotgun. I'm missing something here. Bartholomew kind of drains all of his oxygen, and he's fighting guys with guns and knives and punching. And then Devlin is kind of freaking out, trying to get Poppy out of there. Poppy vanishes in the midst of this brawl, and one guy manages to shoot Simon in the jaw to the point where like half of his jaw is basically gone, and he's got it bandaged up, and he's always talking with this kind of slur because he's lost a section of his jaw. And this is kind of what
tends to happen when you get shot. Yeah.
This is the inciting incident, is that essentially the King family has been dissolved of sorts, and the butchers want to tie up loose ends. So that entails finding Devlin, finding Poppy, and eventually finding Mildred. And so Devlin manages to call Mildred and say, hey, Grandpa got out. Uncle Bart is dead. Grandpa's also dead. I don't know where my sister is. And we don't know what to do. and we need help. And so Mildred at the same time has been noticing a couple of people have been asking around town about her. And we don't know if they're the authorities or if they're a rival gang yet, but eventually it comes down to they are a rival gang. And we have this very clever ambush where this rival gang does go to try and tie up loose ends by taking out Mildred. And they go to her cabin, and as soon as they enter, they notice all the lights are on, the TV is on, and all the windows are open. And they're very confused by this because they're searching for her. And all of a sudden, an arrow comes streaking in through the window and gets one guy in the neck and then pins him to the fridge. And I thought that was a pretty cool scene. That's a pretty cool sequence. And we get the idea of what she's done. She's basically boxed her enemies in her own home and secured it with a ton of light so that she can see what's going on inside from a great distance. And using her bow and arrow skills, she's taking them out before they can even find her. And because it's a silent weapon, they can't really get a bearing as to where she's coming from.
Yeah.
And I'm this is kind of how you do that. When you have a weaker protagonist against physically more powerful antagonists.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a goldmine for action scenes in films now is guns are overused so much. And so use different weapons and find cool creative ways to do it. So I'm always on board for stuff like that. So this scene was cool. I think it shows her badassery, which is kind of fun. Did you feel like all the blocking and sequencing made sense, or did you feel like it was a little bit jumbled?
Earlier pages, it made more sense. As we got into more set pieces, that's when we started losing situational geography with regards to the scene and where people were, how it was playing out, and what's going on. And this one here is simple. She kills two guys with a bow and arrow, and she sneaks up behind one guy, takes out his knee with the mallet, and then takes out his arm with the gun, and then hits him across the face, knocking him out with the mallet. Which is pretty believable, because if you have a hammer or a weapon and you're hitting somebody, and you're a former biker chick who can still pull a bowstring back and kill a deer at like 100 yards or what have you, you have some reasonable muscle to you. Definitely not for like a fisticuff combat, but enough that if you have a heavy object weapon, you can do some damage. And heck, I remember frequently in the 80s, you'd have some of those like sexy thrillers where like there's a woman in the shower and then some pervert kind of comes up behind her, and what she ends up doing is like she kind of takes him off guard because she just turns around to face him full frontal, and she's got like a towel in her hand, and then she hits the guy across the face with the towel, and then he goes down, and then out of the towel comes like the handle to the shower head or something,
Oh,
and you're like, oh, they used the metal shower head, snuck it in the towel, and then used it kind of as a sling to knock the guy out.
I have not seen that film, but it sounds awesome. You got to let me know what that was.
Oh God, I'm pulling that out of my memory from when I was a kid. But I'm pretty sure I can find it.
Something on Cinemax, probably.
Well, we had in Canada called Baby Blue, which was like movies after 11 p.m. on City TV. That was back when that network was awesome. But I'm pretty sure that's probably where I saw it, or probably saw it on like the Movie Network or something.
I mean, that's a valid tactic. A woman turns nude at the guy, and he's like, "Whoa, how you doing?" And then before he can even glance back at her or make eye contact, she like whips him in the face. Like that's legit. I would believe.
Yeah.
I would buy that. Like the girl bossing that we're getting now is just stupid. Where you have a 110-pound girl beating up dudes that are 250 pounds.
With their
and
fists, and not with a
with their
weapon,
fists.
not with a chain, not with any, like, even in the Batwoman thing, they had a frying pan part, but the choreography was just like the concept of the tools, like, oh, woman with a frying pan attacking a guy. That actually happens because there's several reports of a disgruntled housewife hitting her spouse in the head with a frying pan and killing him in one blow because frying pans and skillets are really heavy and very powerful. But the choreography has to match the situation, and rarely.
And I would go one step
work.
further.
Yeah,
I would go one step further and say the casting matters too.
Yeah.
There are some women that can pull the physicality off of and make it believable. Like, what's that movie from what Gina Carano was in where she beats the shit out of that guy for like 2 minutes? It's like this incredible
High
fight
Wire
scene.
or Haywire or something.
Yeah, but you know what I'm thinking of, right?
Yeah.
Like, holy crap. There's not one part of that whole sequence that I'm like, not believable. No, that was like, and that's how it would be. You have someone that would have to use leverage. You have to use weapons around the room to try and fight back somebody that's twice their size and not get pinned down. Because as soon as they're on top of you and they pin you down, you're screwed, right? You can't do that. And so, I think that casting, and too many times that's where they miss the boat. And I could go back and go, I'm trying to think of a good example right now of something that I've watched recently.
Well, I would say,
if they had a better example of
if
a
you
better
want to
female
show
cast.
if you want to show your average thin woman in a combat scene, I would say take a look at what Jackie Chan does in a lot of his movies, where he uses his surroundings to his advantage, because you can actually get away with that. If you were like to kick a chair and just kick a chair and cause the guy to kind of stumble or just lose, you have to like address the chair so that she can get in like a slap or a hit with a broom handle or something, and then keep running away, but keeping them all at the distance and in a very fluid and fast manner and a nice wide shot. People would buy into that because what they'd be seeing is, oh, this woman who's clearly weaker than the people around her is using every single object around her to just keep the people away from her. She's not trying to beat them up. Because that's the thrilling aspect of the Jackie Chan stuff, is like he's always outnumbered, especially in like First Strike, where he's like got the ladder and he's flipping that around and everything. The ladder is going to do a little bit of damage, but it's really just to keep them all at a distance so that he can just not die, because he knows that if he gets surrounded, they will kill him.
Yeah, and I just thought of a good example. This isn't about it with a female, but it's similar. A small guy versus a huge guy, which is in I believe it was the first. Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movie. Remember that huge giant guy, and they have that fight down in front of the boat, the shipping yard.
Yep.
And that dude is huge, and Sherlock he has to figure out how not to die from this huge dude, right? And he ends up figuring out. He finds that little experiment thing that, or maybe that was the fight.
Well, he smacks him really hard in the ears. I know that because that hurts. Like
he pops his ears. Yeah, and that can throw off your equilibrium really badly too.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, stuff like that. So I think we get it. Like, yeah, you've got to make the fight seem believable. Because to me, especially, like, can we please, for the love of God, pull back from the girl boss stuff? I love a good action, female action role, but it has to be believable. And now it's been crammed down our throats so much now that all of us are kind of like, the new status quo is that it's going to suck. And that's crap. Let's get back to where when we do get a good a female action or fight scene that it's creative and it's believable in a way that we're like actually rooting for her to win instead of for the guy to win, because we're like, this is just stupid. So yeah, I do think that we'll get to that when we get to towards the end of the show tonight. But that's one of my flaws in this script, is I think that the girl bossing was too much.
It gets there because this has a number of set pieces, but even in the set pieces, we always keep going to like various flashbacks. So the narrative has to constantly reset to give us more context, because the story itself is forcing its way into being high octane, high pace. but it's doing so at the expense of us knowing exactly what's going on, because after that little fight scene, the first fight scene, which is the believable one in the cabin, we then come back to where we open at the movie, where there's the guy who he is now, all of his limbs are purple and bruised and horribly mangled, and he is now kind of talking a little bit, but not by much. And Mildred does this one thing, which I kind of appreciated. I thought it was some good insight into her character, which is that she's like, she asks the guys, like, do you have children? He goes, yes. She's like, what's their names? And he starts to say the names, and then she kills them. The thing that bothered me is the hand holding that the writer has with the description around the dialogue. So in that scene that I just described, you as an audience member can infer a lot from that. Oh, the last thing that was on that guy's mind when he was shot in the head was his children. But then the script manages to repeat that very thing that we just got shown in action and dialogue in the description as a narrative cue. And I'm like, this is telling me that this writer thinks anyone reading his script is a moron. Or he's dealt with enough executives to know that they're not very smart people, and he's definitely trying to make sure that they get what he is doing. Both of which are, I mean, I hate to say it to you, but if you do send a script to an executive, they're not the ones reading it, their assistants are, and their assistants are giving them like cliff notes of the script. So putting that much effort into it, when the people that will really be reading the script are not the executives, but like the director you get attached, the actors you get attached, and they don't need that level of handholding. Even though, with very few exceptions, most actors are dumb, they are clever enough when it comes to human emotions and actions on a fictional on a page about a piece of fiction, that they know exactly what is being conveyed here. However, it pertains to their grasp of reality outside of a story, completely different set of rules for them, which is why they say such stupid things all the time, and have since the 1920s.
Yeah.
But
those moments where we just kind of sigh and roll our eyes are like, okay, thanks for that. Yeah.
But this is where we kind of kick off where, okay, the inciting incident is now they came after Mildred. She knows that her brother and her father are dead, that maybe her nephew is also dead, and that her 2 kids are missing. So that is her situation right now. And she immediately goes back to her shop. She takes out a couple of big old stacks of cash.
Script. No, she first went back to the Bronco, man. Come on, let's hit this Bronco.
Oh,
Bronco
right.
awesome.
She went to the Bronco. She put the 3 bodies in her Bronco and then drove them off.
She gets a big gun, remember?
Yep.
She gets that 357, which I've never shot, but I've always wanted to. And then, and now she's like, so now that was the inciting incident. Now we're like, okay, let's go. What's going to happen next? So, so I liked this. So far, I was pretty on board. You know, I'm like, okay, this is good. I like the creativity with how she killed those guys and trapped them. That was smart. Mm-hmm. But we have a lot of cliches coming up. Now, I'm okay with violence. I have no problems with that. But I just feel like, especially when you're doing mob stuff and biker stuff, it's really, really easy to dip into the cheesiness of it, and you got to be careful. And though that's somewhat subjective, I get it. I think that, oh my God, what's that biker show that so many people like that was like 8 seasons?
Oh, Sons of Anarchy.
Yes. Okay, I got through a season and a half, and I had to finally just stop because there were so many parts that were so dumb that were supposed to be all badass, and I was just like, this is so cringy to me. I gave up. I've heard it gets even better down the road, but I've got to be honest, it was too cheesy for me. And so I felt like, especially with mob stuff, like I love The Sopranos, rewatched it like 3 or 4 times. I would say I like The Godfathers. I appreciate what they did for cinema, but I would be lying if I said I love them. They're just so amazing. I'm like, no, I could watch Godfather once every 8 years and I'd be fine. And then everything else with mob stuff. Like I told you, I just restarted the Daredevil Netflix series. I'm getting prepped. I want to make sure I have all that stuff ready for the new series that's about to drop. And I love it, right? I love the way they did like the mob-ish stuff with Fisk and everything. Mm-hmm. So you got to be careful because it's really easy to be cliche and cheesy with the mob stuff. And I felt like what's coming up in the story it doesn't. There's no kind of. It does. It got really cheesy for me at least. So yeah, I keep going through the action sequences because it is cool. There's some really good set pieces in here that I did like.
No, they happen. I mean, there's this one at the bar, which I found silly, but when you see what it was at the end, you realize, oh, okay, I know what that was. We will get to that in a moment. But right now, like, Mildred has dispatched and disposed of her 3 attackers. And now she is basically giving Natalie a whole bunch of money and saying, keep paying yourself every Thursday, you and your brother. Tell the whole neighborhood that the shop is closed for a couple of weeks. It's going to go under renovation or what have you. And that Mildred is taking a much-needed vacation. And don't tell anyone anything other than that, and be silent. And, Natalie just, to accept this as okay, doing that. And then Mildred just starts to make her commute, essentially, back home. And this is kind of where things kind of get a little off, because we then get another beat where we kind of stop the story and we go into some backstory exposition. And this is where other characters, who I guess are following her, are sharing with us what she was. So we find out that, over a little over 20 years ago, Mildred was dating this guy named Huey, who is a real bigwig with the Tridents, which is a biker gang. And they had a deal with the Kings until her dad no longer wanted that deal. But instead of, wiping them out, he decided to change the deal and then take his daughter back. And the only reason that Mildred went back is because she didn't want a war between the Tridents and her family. And they're saying, like, it's this really smart thing to do. I mean, it broke her heart, but then she got married off to this Jimmy Mike guy. Jimmy Mike, which, again, such a weird... His name is James Michael, but he likes to go by Jimmy Mike.
I know, just to hear you say it, it
doesn't sound great out loud. But on top of that, we find out that Jimmy Mike is this guy who's way too loyal to the King family, so much so that he marries Mildred just for the sake of Sebastian. And then on top of that, the kids all have the King last name because that's how much Jimmy Mike cared about the family.
Which to me is a very kind of a cuckold move. Like that
it's
was
a beta move. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, this is just stupid. But but I get it if you're trying to be like, this is his devotion to the family. Okay, but this is exactly what I was talking about. This is too cheesy. I'm like, no, that's stupid. Now I have less respect. I already had little respect because he has a stupid name, but now I have even less because he's like, yeah, I want my kids to have their mother's last name because that's
their grandfather's name, really.
Yes, our grandfather's. But why doesn't he just legally change his name too? Let's take it to the next level, right? And we have a scene where he's leaving the Social Security office and he's like proud of his new paper because he changed his last name to King. Like, anyway, yeah.
Well, I mean,
that was
in him. He's doing it out of he is this sniveling type of weasel that is really just and a parasite of sorts. He's just latching onto people and sucking them dry for whatever he has, which is different because one of my good friends, his last name is Smith, and it's the most boring, overused name ever. And he actually got along really well. He's married now, but he took his father-in-law's last name because his father-in-law has this really cool last name that's very rare and different. And he's just like, there's so many damn Smiths. What the hell's the point? And on top of that, he actually really, really is best friends with his father-in-law too. And it's just done out of respect and the fact that how many Smiths are there throughout North America? Almost a billion.
don't ever get a divorce though, or that's gonna be awkward.
Well, they've been married 20 years. I think they're in it for the long haul right now. But we all thought it was weird at first, but then he said listen, there's so many Smiths around here. The name's never gonna die. But this guy, I've never met a person with that last name. I have no problem carrying it on. He's a cool dude. I love his daughter. He has no sons. It's not hurting me any much. It's still my kids that are coming out.
Yeah, and I could see that. That's super rare. I mean, it would depend on if you wanted to carry on your own name, if you had brothers, right? And if it's a big deal that your legacy of your name carries on, and if it was a big deal to his father-in-law, then I guess I could see that. It's rare, but it's definitely that's cool. That'd be a cool twist in a story that you could put. It's based on a real life experience. That's cool. And as long as you can sell it and explain it, and your viewers can be like, okay, yeah, all right, that's awesome. Have some a little extra cool flavor for the backstory, then I'm fine with it. This was the opposite of that.
This was very much the opposite of that. This was the whole doing everything you can to show loyalty, but without ever showing action that would suggest respect or loyalty. It's yeah, sure, I'll marry your daughter. It's no, if you really cared about this guy, you'd care about the daughter. You would actually like her. You'd want to make it work. You wouldn't just do it for the sake of appeasing the old man, so to speak. And yeah, like that's just like, you don't trust this guy. But we find out, they tried to make it work, but then all of a sudden, something happens. Something happens with Mildred's mother where Sebastian orders her execution, and it looks like from the script it is implied that Jimmy's the one that carried it out. And instead, and this kind of broke up their marriage, even though they haven't technically gotten divorced. But essentially what it is said is that, okay, Mildred's mother betrayed the family in some way, probably selling secrets or throwing in with another family. Jimmy Mike kills her, is then sent away, and then Mildred is also sent away because she would have probably killed her father out of revenge. And her father managed to get a hold of her kids, during that chaos moment, and said, if you come, you have to leave. And if you try to come back, we will get rid of your kids. And we know Sebastian is serious because he just got rid of his wife. Mm-hmm. so he doesn't care. It's almost a little bit like a Kaiser Soze thing from Usual Suspects. I felt like while I'm reading this, I'm kind of picking up other movies that have done these types of ideas better. And I get what Josh Corbin is trying to do with like mixing them up so that we can get a more intimate and more empathetic situation for Mildred, where she has exiled herself from her children to keep them alive because she knows that her brother is going to keep them safe, because the deal that she made with her dad is that she's going to stay away. But here's the other twist, is that her dad Sebastian gets put in jail, I guess, for murdering his wife and a series of other crimes that they're able to pin him on. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, Bartholomew is still loyal to his father. So if his father says, hey, if Mildred comes back, you got to take care of your niece and nephew, and not in the whole nurturing way, but in the 6 feet under way, that shows me like this Bartholomew guy is a slime ball as well. Like he doesn't have any balls against his own dad when he's behind bars.
And that's her own brother. So I'm like, so, okay, you're showing how ruthless they are, but there comes a point where, especially if you want any empathy for some of these characters or understanding, that you can't make them complete monsters. Mm-hmm. And great example, again, back to Wilson Fisk. We in Daredevil, I just saw that, the first couple episodes, and you see where he meets that his girlfriend in the
Vanessa,
art gallery.
Yeah.
And we see them go on a date, and you see how you can at least go relate to Fisk and go, okay, he really wants to make the city better, and he'll do it at any cost, right? For whatever his version of better is. And that amazing scene where after they finish having their second dinner, and you see all the explosions going off in Hell's Kitchen, right? And she's watching it with him. Mm-hmm. And he's like, all those people that kidnapped that boy and beat up his dad and kidnap that boy, they won't be doing that again, right? Is basically what he says to her as there's all these explosions. Mm-hmm. And she kind of gets this look on her face like, good, right? Like it's so good. And so with this, again, it felt kind of convoluted. And I don't know. I usually have better feedback, but I'm not sure how he could fix that and make this better specifically. I can't give you a specific thing to fix. Maybe you can do it, script. But the thing is, like, I'm sitting here listening to you going through the names. I just pulled up the family tree I drew out, and I'm like, yeah, so we have, it's just too confusing. It's really confusing. So Sebastian's wife was Louise.
Louise, yep.
And then Poppy, who is Mildred's daughter, her daughter is Louise. So we have two Louises, right? One of them's dead.
Louise King and Louise Walsh, yeah.
Right. And then we have Devlin, right? Which was
Poppy's brother.
Yeah, the brother. And then Bradley. So we have Poppy, Bradley, and Devlin, right? That are all the same age.
Well, anyway, Bradley's 35, so he's married to Poppy, so he's the oldest of them all.
Right, and then isn't Devlin the same age? That's how I have it written down.
23.
I might have moved this. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's just, if you're listening, you're confused. Trust me, you'd be confused on the script, especially in a film that moves a lot faster than a script. It's just too many characters, and there's just a lot going on. It's too much. It's just too much. Too many spinning plates.
I mean, it gets even more further because Jimmy Mike isn't even Poppy's father.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
yeah. So it gets nuts, but we get all this exposition telling us like where these players are and where they're in place and why they are the way this is. it's done boring because it's other characters talking about your main characters, and you don't want to do that. You should show us this journey in a more inventive way. Like this, when you're dealing with exposition as a writer, that is that is where you should be able to shine with your skills of how can I tell this story without having to sit the person down and just spout off the facts. Like, what is a more effective way where I can do that? And sometimes, I mean, it also comes down to your level of excitement. So I know writers, when they're even in their veteran years, are so excited they just kind of want to vomit out everything because they feel like you really need to know all the intimate details, when in some cases all you need is like the byproduct of the actions of the characters to imply what has actually happened prior. So you would have a situation where Poppy and Mildred would meet again, and Poppy would say, how many years has it been? And Mildred would kind of like say, oh, it's definitely over a decade. And Poppy would like 2 decades. And then Mildred would say, no, 17 years. Like, because she would say the accurate number, you can infer as an audience member, like, she's been the one keeping track. And you know that relationship.
Right. And you don't know, and you don't need to go any deeper than that. Or it could be something like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Or she could see her, and this doesn't relate specifically to this. I'm just going to throw something else out there that would do the same thing, which is she like rubs her. They meet for the first time again. We know it's been a while or something, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't know if they're friendly or not. And then you see like maybe Mildred like starts to kind of like rub her hand a little bit. And the camera can show that she's got a scar, and then she's like, "Oh yeah, does it still hurt?" And she's like, "Yep." And and that's it. She doesn't have to say anything else. She just says, "Yep," and she's kind of got this look on her face like she's still mad about something. And you're like, "Okay, this is going to be a tense scene. Whatever's about to happen, they're not buddies."
Right.
And we don't need that. We don't need an exposition dump we don't care. We don't care.
No.
And we sure as heck don't have the time for it, especially when the script is already 122 pages long. It's too much.
Yeah, you're wasting valuable real estate on exposition that's not really needed. At this point, like before we get the whole why Mildred was sent away and the really difficult reasoning, it's not very believable, but it's really like a stretch. For context, it just doesn't hit as hard, at least not for me. So now that we got that exposition, Mildred ends up going to this is where she goes to the bar to the Tridents, and she's not really looking to get the whole gang involved. She just wants to get one guy, which is Huey, which is her old boyfriend, the love of her life, and we meet the bartender, which is, I think, was it Bex or something?
I think so. That sounds right.
Yeah, Bex.
So there's a lot of B's in this.
There's a lot of B's in this thing. So she goes into the bar, and Bex is giving her the 3rd degree, but she does this code word, and the whole code word is that you got to like hold your milk. And so she has to drink a glass of milk, and then Bex tells various members of the bar to get up and attack Mildred. And Mildred gets into 3 fights. She wins the first 2. No, wait, she wins all 3, and then Bex fights her and kicks her butt, and she pukes out the milk. And then the other 3 kind of get up, and it's implied that they were just trying to get her to puke. They weren't actually trying to fight her to like a death or anything. And they weren't going hard on her, which is why she was able to kind of like, subdue them temporarily for a bit. Because they were kind of like throwing in the towel a lot earlier than afterwards, because at the end they're all laughing and drinking and they're buddies, and it's like, okay, I see what this was. It was just, make her sweat, see if she'll spill the milk.
This was cheese, dude. This bugged me. It's so dumb to me. I'm sorry, but that's my opinion.
Yeah,
I hate it.
No, but the thing is that you end up learning this after the fact. And so it makes everything we saw for it like, oh, this is kind of disingenuous. Here's the girl boss stuff. Oh, wait, no, it's trying to be a bait and switch, but it doesn't land because you're going way too detailed with the fight. And you're also trying to allude that, yep, Mildred knocked this guy out flat on his butt with her mallet. And then the next person, the same thing. And that the adrenaline kicks in, and now it's easier for her to beat up the other person. It's like, no, sorry, you're misleading. You're misleading deliberately for the sake of trying to pull the rug out from everyone afterwards, and it's just inauthentic.
And it was, for me, it was whiplash. It was like, oh, here's our boss bee, and she's doing, oh, there she goes, and there she goes, and there she goes, and then, no, just kidding. It was a test. So then you're kind of relieved because you're like, oh, so she's not boss bitch. But then you're like, but at the same time, this is stupid. I feel like it was a bait and switch, and I got like you were trying to like deceive me. And instead of feeling rewarded, because if you do that right, if you're not in on the joke until afterwards, and it's a good one, then you're like, okay, you got me. That was cool, right? But in this case, it wasn't. And so yeah, this was just cheese to me, man. Pure cheese.
Yeah,
Put it on my
like
nachos.
if anything, the way I would have framed it to sort of allude that they were kind of goading her would be when she's fighting Bex. Bex just like pins her arms, and then the other three just get up, and it's like they just shook off what happened, and you realize, oh, they were faking, and then they just come in and just start like hitting her in the stomach until she pukes up the milk, because then you'd realize, okay, they were testing her, and this is how they test her to see what she's doing, and everything that she did beforehand was them just kind of inflating her ego only to kind of set her back, because it's that, I guess that would be the better attitude for if you're a member of the Tridents is, if you think that you're overinflating your ego or a little bit arrogant or whatever thing, we're going to make sure we knock you down to what your normal level is, because that would have made more sense. And that would have also been a bit more authentic to like a biker gang of sorts, where someone gets a little bit too big for their britches and they're not like the head of the gang, they will get their butts handed to them to remind them what their place is.
Yeah, but I doubt it involves milk. I'm just going to say that. I doubt it involves milk. Anyway, yeah, so I'm glad we felt about the same way about that, because it was just kind of whatever. Again, I just think it was fine. It was fine. I didn't get that excited. It was just kind of like, eh.
No, but this reconnects her with Huey, who has gone sober. Apparently he was in jail for a short spell, and he's now out, but he's got a probation officer, and he has to like scare kids straight or what have you. And Mildred kind of lays out to Huey's like, hey, so this is the deal. So we got repeated story beats again. And she's like, can you help me get this figured out? And this is the thing that's kind of interesting, because at no point in the script do we know for certain that Mildred knows where to go or what to do. It's only implied after the fact that I guess she got all this information out of the guy in her cabin that she tortured. Because there's a lot of dots that are missing in order to connect from beat A to C. Like where's point B for us to get to this situation?
How many flashbacks did we have in this script, do you think?
6, I think. 6 or 7.
Because it felt like a lot. It felt like a lot. So let's analyze that for a second. So as a script writer, what's too much leaning into flashbacks? Like
1. That's my personal opinion, but like,
that's
yeah.
it.
Okay,
because it can give you context, which is good. It can give you, right, instead of, again, show, don't tell. So in a way, that's good, right? Because you're showing. You're not just having two people talk about what happened. You're showing it.
Yeah.
But man, if you do it so much, it's just like, it kills the momentum of the main plot, right? Of the main story, especially in an action type film. So yeah, what do you say? What are your notes on something like that?
So there's many different types of flashbacks. The easiest one to get away with is the flashback via narration. So a character is being interrogated, and they're telling the story as part of the interrogation, and we're getting a flashback of those visuals and maybe a little speck of dialogue that's kind of repeated by the character that has become the narrator for that portion. But those should really be very short. They should only be like a couple of pages. You take a look at something like The Usual Suspects, which I brought up earlier. That movie is told through a narration of a series of flashbacks, but we always come back to the main room, which is essentially a real-time story that's being told with flashbacks that allows us to jump throughout time all over the place.
Yeah, if I remember right, that's Kevin Spacey in an interrogation room, right? And he keeps on going back and telling the stories, right?
Like he's telling a story every time, and that story raises other questions. The guy starts asking him questions about that, and we get another story. And there's all these, and the way that works so well is that every single flashback is a very condensed mini story. It's got a beginning, middle, and end. It's got characters with a set of characters, a conflict for them to address, and then their point of action to resolve it with a denouement of what are the consequences of that action that they did to resolve it. Other flashbacks there's flashbacks where you're putting together a mystery, or you have like something like Rashomon or Vantage Point, where we see an event going on, and then we repeat that event from different perspectives so that we see different stuff and we piece together the rest of the story. That is a specific type of narrative structure that works because you're given a very simple action, and now you're getting new information with every new point of view. and sometimes those points of view will conflict with each other, and that creates your conflict. So you as an audience member are trying to deduce, well, which one is telling the truth, and until we get to the next one to find out the new information, we can then piece together which one is which one is true and which one is false, and then that character we understand is the antagonist and the liar and the one that we have to go after, and so forth. Then you have flashbacks like, for instance, the Sonic movie, where it starts out in the present and it says, oh, but big action sequence, and then they pause midway and be like, oh, now let's go back to how we got here. So this is a cheap moment, meaning that your initial inciting incident of the story is not boring enough to capture people, so you're teasing them with the climax and then resetting them back. And we got the same thing with J.J. Abrams in Mission Impossible 3, with Tom Cruise getting tortured, and then we go back a week or something of that nature. And these are actually really frustrating. If you're going to do a flashback, it has to have a beginning, middle, and end. It has to be as short as possible, and it has to be in pace with the story. And it all depends on the type of story that you're writing in order for you to do that, which means that you have to set up a question that can then be answered by the flashback, and then that answer has to set up a second question that has to be played for in the present. And in this particular script here, it doesn't quite do that. These flashbacks are purely expositional, which means that it stops the flow of the story.
Gotcha. Yeah, somebody in chat mentioned Highlander had great flashback scenes in it.
Highlander had flashback scenes because Highlander would be using those flashbacks, especially in the television series, they'd use those flashbacks to set up the conflict of the episode, which means that, another immortal is here. I have had an encounter with him, or I know someone has an encounter with him. This is a story, so that this establishes the level of threat that they are. And then it's up to Duncan or Connor McLeod or whatever McLeod it was at the time to do that. When it comes to like the traditional Highlander film, these are done in character points. So they are exposition, but even when you take a look at the origin of Connor McLeod's discovering he's an immortal, it's done as an empathetic story. It has a beginning, middle, end. The beginning is that he's off to go to a battle, and it's his first real battle. And he's terrified, but he's also very brave. And then in that battle, nobody is fighting him. And he's like, why is nobody fighting him? And then you find out that the Kurgan specifically wants McLeod one-on-one. Why? Because he wants to kill him so that he can take his power, because he can tell that he's an immortal. And Connor has no idea about this. So he gets stabbed, but he doesn't get his head chopped off because he's thwarted back. And then he recovers from his wounds, which then means that people think he's of an evil spirit, and he gets excised out. And so he is kicked out of his clan, and he is left to roam alone. And then he meets Heather, and then we come back to the present where he's kind of like, we see that after the boxing match, he's kind of freaked out about it. He then meets the other the other immortal. They have a fight in the parking lot, and then he tries to get out, and then that's when he gets arrested. So we have this congruent storyline of, why did you kill this guy, or did you kill this guy? And if so, what the heck's going on here? And then all these other murders are popping up of beheadings, and that's your main storyline, which leads to him meeting, I guess, Rachel. And then as he is falling in love with her, he's remembering his wife Heather, and then that we get the story beats of that, him meeting Ramirez, learning about what it means to be a Highlander, and he's kind of relived. And each of these flashbacks are their own self-contained story, and they pepper throughout the narrative of basically the final battle between these two immortals, and that's what it's all setting up.
So do you have to weigh? Because I love Highlander. This is a good example.
It's a great movie. Yeah.
Do you have to weigh like the momentum you would lose by doing a flashback in certain scenes? So it's important that you put them in the right spot, I'm assuming. Plus, it's important that they're not too long. Mm-hmm. Plus, it's important that even that flashback still moves the overall story forward. As long as you do those things, you still don't want to rely on them too much, right? You don't want to do too many flashbacks, because, like you said, one is enough. But an example like a Highlander, I mean, there were several, but it was okay in that context, right? So I'm trying to figure out where do you how do you approach that and do it well if you are trying to write a script?
Well, first of all, you have to think of how do the flashbacks actually inform the current story that you're telling. So with the longer flashbacks in Highlander, you have Connor going through the hero's journey, and that is he discovers he's immortal. He's excised from his clan, so he's in a world he doesn't know. He's then mentored by Ramirez, so he learns the rules of what it is. Ramirez, his mentor, is killed while he's not there by the very man that triggered Connor being immortal. That'd be the Kurgan, and then and then the Kurgan never shows up again after that until he's back in New York. And so what we see here is that in the 1980s in New York, Connor and Kurgan reconnect after 400 years, where Kurgan nearly killed him before he became a Highlander. So now we have Connor McLeod, an experienced the Highlander, an experienced immortal, who is now going to fight, his essentially the demon, who has become incredibly powerful. He's got to be like almost 1,000 years old, having killed hundreds, if not thousands, of other mortals. And it's this big, overwhelming obstacle. It's a David versus Goliath type of story. Can Connor McLeod defeat the man who triggered his immortality, abused his wife, killed his mentor, and has plagued thousands or tens of thousands of immortals through who knows how many lifetimes? Can he defeat him and stop him so that he doesn't get this ultimate prize, which we don't know what it is until the very end? And one of the things that's also kind of interesting is that you find out that there are some immortals who they may be driven by the prize, but they resist the temptation of killing each other because there's a humanity to them. We find out that Connor McLeod is actually friends with another immortal that's in New York, and they end up reminiscing about a couple of stories, one of which goes back to when Connor was in a duel and he kept on getting defeated and stabbed and shot, but he wouldn't die.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Because he was drunk.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
And then there's the other one where he finds his pseudo daughter during the Second World War, where he gets shot, and he survives that. He kills the aggressor and saves the little girl, and she becomes his assistant.
Okay, but those are all great. But
they're all little smaller stories that are showing like how these people got into his life, but also why they're so loyal to him.
So why are the flashbacks in this script so painful for me?
Because they don't actually carry on the momentum of the story. We are not getting the flow of a secondary story from beginning to end, in the sense, because one part of this story that we should have gotten as a flashback that we ended up getting as a dialogue exposition was when Sebastian ordered the execution of his wife, Mildred's response to that, and why she was exiled out. All of that is told in dialogue. It's not shown to us. So that's your first point of that stop. The next part of the flashback we have are really short little instances, which I like, but again, they're driven by the fact that it's just to stop the story, to say, this is Mildred. She had a relationship with Huey, who is part of the Tridents, and it didn't go well, so now we're here. Like it just doesn't feel like it should have been told as like a love story tragedy, where if you were to do it as a flashback, taking a cue from Highlander, you would have a young Mildred and a young Huey together, understanding the context of the situation, which is that the deal has changed between their two families, and despite of how much she loves Huey and how much Huey would be, is in charge of the tribes, would be loyal to her and to the family, Sebastian cannot be trusted, and so Mildred has to walk away from this relationship in order to save the man she loves and to prevent a gang war between their two families. And so you have to frame that as a story that's tragic, as opposed to having a couple of guys who are either mob bosses or members of the FBI giving a debrief to the audience.
Oh, okay. So one of them's done more. Tell me if this is fair. This is how I try to phrase this. One, like in Highlander, it's more poetic, it's more organic, whereas in this, it's more clinical. It's more like, hey, here's a memo of what just happened. Is that fair?
Kind of. It's like a cliff notes of things. It's a tell don't show aspect. And even when they get a little bit more into it, like, because there's another flashback with Poppy, and they get a bit more into the showing, it's still jumbled a bit because it's coming very late, and it also makes you question why Mildred would not be mortified by the action, because it is essentially the same action that Sebastian took 20 years prior. But but yeah, so Huey and
Okay.
Mildred, they gear up Matrix style,
Right. Yep. Yep. Yep.
and then they drive to this bar that they somehow know about uh, to talk to Simon, and he's got his bandaged jaw. And of course, as soon as she comes in, she kind of disarms herself a little bit because she's outnumbered, but she goes behind the bar so that no one can come up from behind her. They have their conversation. It's a bunch of platitudes. Simon talks about how brilliant he is, knowing that her boyfriend is parking the car out back, but he doesn't stand a chance. This triggers into a huge bar fight with guns blazing. Fortunately for Mildred, she's got a really good hand-eye coordination, and she throws the bottle at a guard so that he's knocked out and she can take his gun, which I thought is kind of ridiculous. And it's just a shootout, and there's a grenade explosion, and then all of a sudden this guy, was it Murphy? I think it is. Because again, a lot of characters.
I don't remember Murphy. Let me see my notes here.
Yeah, it's
He didn't even make my notes, so
didn't even make.
yeah.
Yeah, Murphy kind of comes in to save the rescue, and I'm trying to figure out like who's Murphy. I can't remember him. What was he? How was he introduced? What's going on? I was kind of going back and forth throughout the script. Couldn't really get a bearing on it. But Murphy comes in. He's got his hands up in the air. He says, "Hey, I can help you. I know where Poppy is. I'll take you to her." And of course, Mildred and Huey, they jump in there. Meanwhile, Devlin goes to visit his dad, Jimmy Mike, who we're introduced to him telling this young lady he doesn't want to be part of her true crime podcast crap. He's been laying low for years. This is part of his routine where he gets a burger and fries. He's, borderline going to have a heart attack. He doesn't care about these things anymore. He just wants to be left alone. And then as he heads home, he sees his son, and his son kind of fills him in on what's going on. And of course, Jimmy Mike is all worried about it, but at the same time thinking, okay, we're probably going to have to get out of Dodge. But before we do you have any snow on you? And so they get high and drunk and party. It's just so
Snow. What's snow? Yeah.
It falls from the sky, and don't eat it if it's yellow. And so that we get father and son drug induced party night, and at the same time Mildred is taken to the King family estate, the one that had the big shootout, and I guess Simon and his cohorts decided not to hold up shop there and take over the property. They just left it, which I thought is kind of weird considering the fact that they wanted the entirety of the business. But anyways, they did that, but this is kind of done deliberately. But they did that. Poppy is there. She's in her old bedroom, and she's reunited with Mildred. And this is where we get another flashback, and that is where Poppy confesses that Simon shooting up the family was something she orchestrated because she doesn't like her grandfather, and her father's going to die. Her father's gone, and then her uncle is kind of dying. And she remembers, learning about how the family business on the world stage had respect and was not associated with crime because Sebastian's father wanted it to be a clean-looking business. But Sebastian is this big egotist who liked to get his name in the paper, especially for criminal activities, and kind of ruin the family reputation. And so what she wants is the family business and the name for herself to restore to its original glory and intent. And the butchers can do whatever the heck they want, and her family will abide by the rule stipulations and I guess the accounting that is required in order for them to have their reach and control. All she wants is to be left alone with her business to give an innocent and legit life for herself and her daughter and generations to come. And it boggles the mind that she thought this plan would work. Mildred Mildred accepts it as like, okay, you screwed up. And then she says, I did too, and I agreed not to fight for you and just walk away. And it just felt like a very thin scene and conflict that was deliberately avoided because Mildred should be thinking, you put my brother in danger, you put your brother in danger as well. You killed my dad, which I wish I was the one to do that myself. So, there could have been some jealousy there. You've compromised a family that has given everything to you for the sake of a reputation that hasn't existed in over 40 years. You were already out. There's no reason for you to even get involved again. And yet you did. Like, all of these things I'm saying were not even present in the story that should be, because you want to thrive. The stories thrive off of conflict, just like our society does. If we don't have an obstacle to overcome, we get kind of weak and boring and dull and don't have any ambition and kind of get depressed pretty easily. So you kind of need something. You need something to solve, and fortunately, life gives us lots of problems to do that. And in this case here, the problem should have been Mildred trying to figure out with Poppy the lesson that she needed to learn, and then also to face the consequences for this action, which is that she and her family might not get out of this unscathed. And also maybe explore a flaw as to why Poppy really wants to do that. That's deeper than family reputation and trying to get out of a criminal business by basically getting deeper into a criminal business. Like, the logic just isn't there. The method isn't there.
Wouldn't this be a great time to explore further the difference between adopted family and blood family, and like, what that means, like what's acceptable, so we can see where the limits are for these different characters? Because it seems like Mildred's basically at this point, she's like, I made a new family, right? Because my old family sucked. Correct?
My own family, I had to leave the family I made, by her, like made with her husband, for their protection. And in that time that I've been away, I have got a surrogate daughter and son that I've taken care of as well.
Right. Basically adopted them.
Yeah.
And so here we have her daughter revealing this stuff for us. And it's like, but it's been how many years at this point?
17 is what they keep saying.
Okay.
But
so
like Poppy keeps on
17
saying, but the math doesn't add up. And that's implying to the fact that her father is Huey and not Jimmy Mike.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just, again, it was fine. So I'll go back to. I don't have a lot to add, because you hit all the main points, and I'm like, well, it's not exciting. I guess I don't care. I'm not invested. I'm not invested enough in these characters to care enough that this is like awesome for me to finally get this backstory and what happened, right? And there was a betrayal, and so it was
not
fine.
rewarding. That's the problem. Like, it doesn't.
Right.
The question isn't strong enough for an answer to make it worth the investment at this point. And then from this point on, it basically says, Poppy's like, well, we have a plan, and Mildred's like, what do you mean we? And she's like, well, me and my husband, we have a plan to kind of take over everything and get things in order now that we've been betrayed. And the plan is basically, because her husband Bradley is the accountant for both the Butchers and the King family, what he's proposing to do is drain all the funds from the Butchers, put them into the King accounts, so that they are now at the mercy of the Kings. The only way they can do that is by getting a bunch of these thumb drives that have a pass key on it that allows him to do financial transfers. So this is where we get into a Godfather nod, where we go after these 5 or 6 people in a montage, killing them, taking the thumb drives, bringing them back, having the whole thing done. And they succeed in that manner. And Simon manages to get away, and he realizes his power is slipping. But then all of a sudden, Jimmy Mike shows up with his kid, with Devlin, sorry.
Yeah, Devlin.
And he's just trying to say, hey, let me back in. I see things are kind of settled down. The whole, Sebastian's gone, so the whole fatwa on them is gone as well. And Mildred's not too pleased, and they kind of have a little argument. And then the next thing we know, Jimmy pulls a gun on her, and eventually they get into a fight, and he shoots her in the knee. So she's finally, like, severely injured. And
well, kind of.
like
Sorry,
yeah,
I'll
like,
wait.
and he zip ties her up, throws her in the back of Devlin's car, and they drive to this cabin in Nantucket where Simon is. And this is where we're gonna like stop with the spoiler parts, but essentially, Jimmy Mike gives Simon Mildred in exchange for wanting to work for him, be this parasite to this guy. And so Simon now has Mildred, and he gets to kind of do what he wants and maybe can leverage her for power. And that's pretty much where we're going to cut off here, spoiler wise, because we're already it's like 106, 107 pages into the script where this happens. So the final act is last 14 pages, and it follows similar beats to what we've experienced before of that. But yeah, that's essentially the plot, as scatterbrained as it seems. Is there anything, Mac, you want to add to that, or did we cover?
No.
We pretty much
We
covered
can't.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't go any further. There's some reveals that happen right after that. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Let's get into. I don't think we need to go over any more of the story. Let's get into the critiquing. I've got like 3 or 4 things I want to talk
All
about. Do
right.
you have anything? Do you want me to go first? Do you want to go first?
No, go first, please. You're the guest host today, so please.
Okay, my first thing, I already touched on it, is length, and with that, of course, pacing. Like, there's so much in the edit here that we need to lose. I would say, I'm trying to think of something specific, maybe, of a good idea. Maybe, like, cut out on the flashbacks would be the most obvious thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had so many of those. And I think that we need to do a better job of, maybe let's thin out the characters. There's too many, right?
Yep.
That would help a lot. And then I think just a lot of little things. Let's just shorten a lot of different things that we can do to tighten up the action sequences, or the filler in between those sequences, right? Like, cut to the chase faster. If that's a little vague, I guess. But you see what I'm saying? Like, I didn't spend a ton of time getting specific, but I think that all of that would help. I don't see why the script should be more than, say, 90, 95 pages. What do you think?
Well, I agree. What I would do probably is I would get rid of the cousins and the uncles of the family, make it direct. I would have Mildred not be the daughter of the mob boss, but basically just someone who married into the family. And Sebastian kills his wife, and of course, and my interpretation would be like, well, okay, if he kills his wife, then Mildred would be of the mind to think that, well, she could be next under any suspicion, and there's a likelihood that Sebastian won't kill her husband, which would be his son, and so that's how this deal comes, where she gets kind of exiled out, and it's also against the son's wishes, but I also wouldn't have Sebastian go to jail for it. I have him be around, physically imposing, to the point where his power is suppressing Mildred's husband, and Mildred is living in exile, and he has to raise the kids alone in this family, and it's his arrogance that leads to the whole, being overthrown. And when Mildred learns that her children are alive, but her husband, who she loved, is dead, her father-in-law is dead, and she can't find her kids, that brings her back into the fold. That tightens everything up in the first act a lot, because now it's still predicated on a mother wanting to save her kids, but now we have a little bit of extra empathy and a little bit of extra tragedy, in the sense that her father-in-law separated her from the father of her children, a man whom she loved, and there was nothing that they could do to violate that without compromising the safety of their children. So it was a burden on both of them, and a thing on both of them, where this third party, her father-in-law, wedged himself between these two from being happy. And his own arrogance leads to his demise, but it also takes away her husband and compromises her children, but it also gives her permission to come back into the fold. And I think that's a bit more of a concise story. That could save you 30 pages on the script, in my opinion. And get rid of a ton of characters that are completely useless.
Yeah, there's too much going on. Like, there's one thing to have extras in a bar fight, that's fine, but I just feel like there's too much for a viewer to keep track of here.
Yeah.
The other one I would say that's a big one for me was just the girl bossing. We already talked about that. I think it could be toned down. Even though she got shot in the knee, she still does a lot of stuff after that, but we're not going to talk about it. It's a little bit
Yeah, she
unbelievable.
does, which is silly.
So yeah, let's tone that down. And I get it. Like girl bossing's hot right now. I want someone to pick up my script. So that's probably why we have that here. But it's just so cliche and so stupid. It was always stupid. Now it's like just ridiculously stupid that, just tone it back. We don't. Women and men are different and they both have strengths and weaknesses, and that's okay. It's not, let's stop pretending we live in this fantasy world where, outside of the superheroes, which is fine, women as a superhero can do whatever they want because they're superheroes. We have an explanation for why they are the way they are. So anyway, and then I would say you kind of talked about it already, which is just supporting cast is confusing. So we already talked about that. And then, what else was my last one? Oh, just like the tone of it, it feels like it jumps too quickly between like serious hardcore to like sort of like a rant or a funny bit, right? And I'm not sure if that's easy to, maybe it's just the way I read it and it would be easier to do on screen. But yeah, those are my main nitpicks on this script.
Yeah, I think those. Yeah, I mean that's just it. I mean, I will say this: there wasn't really much of anything dialogue-wise that stood out as cringy or bad. I bought it. Some of the voices were pretty distinct. Jimmy Mike's voice very distinct, like sleazy. Like you leaned into it. You kind of knew how it's been going for a while. So I was like, okay, that's okay. Sebastian was pretty reserved. Like the character voices were distinct enough, and I think that gives it a flair. But after reading this script, I read it twice. Actually, the first time I kind of fell asleep around page 60, and I had to wake up and reread it. But I understood why this script kind of didn't track so high on the blacklist, why it's at the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. I mean, it's still impressive to make the list, but this really, the only thing that this script has for is character voice, because it sets up a clever female combatant in the mob, and then abandons that for more sensational set pieces that break the illusion that has already been established. And then its complication with a convoluted set of plots, overly simplistic characters and far too many of them, and then stopping the momentum of the story with flashbacks.
Yeah, the momentum is a big part of it, I think. It just felt like it wasn't consistent enough all the way through, I guess. I think when you watch, like, say, I'm going to go to an episode of Sopranos or something, like one of the more action-packed ones, there's no question on, like, you don't even think about the structure of the story or the episode because it just all works. You're just blown away, you enjoy it, and then when you're done, you're like, ooh, that was awesome, right? And I know part of that is we're supposed to be going into this show analyzing these scripts, right? So I get that. But I just felt like with this in general, it was a very sort of, I don't want to say blasé, but it's close. It's in the ballpark of blasé is what I will say. And I feel like there's something here. It just would need to be seriously edited, rewritten, shortened down, simplified, and then we could have fun with this. I think there's some key elements that I enjoyed about the story and the characters, but this isn't it. This is not the final draft that I would want people to read.
Yeah. This is not something I would think is in the right shape to be sent out as it is. With that being said, Mac, would you give this a green light or a pass?
I would pass on this for sure.
Yeah, I would pass as well. And we're going to go check in on the Patreon to see what you guys, who are Patreon members, voted. Would you green light or pass this script, Mildred? And according to the poll, we have a 100% for support for passing on Mildred. So if the writers out there listening to us, please don't take this as like a blind hate or anything of that. We definitely did read the script wanting it to be great. We did point out how there's some aspects in the first act that were quite good. But as the story unfolded, as it kept on going on, it was losing me personally. And definitely raised some red flags on certain choices and executions that were to be made. The other part too is I think some of the influences that you drew upon need to be reworked to be a bit more subtle so that they can't be so easily identified. As you pointed out earlier, there's definitely influences from Yellowstone, Tulsa King, Godfather. So maybe try find some ways to kind of rework that to make them a bit more distinct. So with that being said, any last little thoughts to address before we call it a night?
Nope, I think we're good. Thanks for having me on. It was fun as always.
Yes, always happy to have you here as well as all the other co-hosts that are able to swing by. I want to thank everyone for hanging out with us tonight live, and for those listening on the replay. Just another reminder: if you want to get you want to find out what movie what screenplay we'll be reviewing on Saturdays, you can go join the Patreon. The first week is free at the lowest tier. You get all the info with regards to the shows coming up, plus all the past shows, past articles, even some exclusive videos that are there before they pop up on YouTube. Other than that, always happy to have you, Mac, and everyone in the chat listening in on these Saturday nights to get an understanding of screenplays and the quality of their work, and also where the industry is going. And I would say, because this script kind of didn't resonate with a lot of producers, nor did it resonate with us for various reasons that are similar to what has been kind of being pushed out of the industry, I think it's a good sign that those producers kind of recognized it and thought, no, this is not this is not for us in this state. So I want to thank everyone out there for listening. Have a wonderful weekend, guys, and never forget, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.